666.
Turkish President Recep Erdoğan will be in Riyadh for a 2-day visit to include meetings with King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Interestingly enough, and we aggregate and curate the news every day, you would barely know it from the Saudi press. Saudi Gazette had a very short article about it 2 days, but not a peep from Arab News or SPA. Coverage in other areas. Conversely, according to Arab Weekly, in Turkey, quote, the trip has been publicized many times by the Turkish president and his entourage. For months, Erdogan has been announcing that he was bound for Riyadh on one date and then postponing it to another. The visit was thus moved from February, then to March, and finally to April, close quote. So he's there today. The Turkish enthusiasm is understandable. I mean, President Erdogan is on a reconciliation tour that thus far has included stops in the UAE and Egypt. At home, he's in dire straits. He faces economic turmoil, soaring inflation, a currency crisis, depressed foreign investment. And with this trip to Saudi, in particular, President Erdogan will seek the lifting of the unofficial trade boycott that reduced Turkish exports to Saudi Arabia from $2.5 billion in 2020 to $250 million in 2021. Also in the past, Turkey has been a preferred vacation destination for Saudis. Erdogan would like that revenue back as well. For Saudi Arabia, the ambivalence to this visit is understandable. Yes, Saudi Arabia and Turkey are the largest economies in the Middle East. Yes, they are both members of the G20 and regional political heavyweights. Yes, Saudi Arabia is seeking to de-escalate tensions across the region. However, this rift is deep and it's personal. Saudi Arabia has been leery of Turkey's intentions since the Arab Spring revolts in 2011 and the subsequent decade in which Ankara supported Islamic groups throughout the region. Add to that Turkey's decision in 2018 to try in absentia the perpetrators of the Jamal Khashoggi murder and Erdogan's efforts to politicize the tragedy and aggressively question the role of MBS. This is what I mean by personal. It got very personal. Erdogan was a cheerleader of this group and it was deeply resented in Saudi Arabia. In advance of this trip, a Turkish court halted the trial in absentia, and Turkey ended its court action, transferring the case to Saudi Arabia. Must have been a prerequisite for any kind of visit for Erdogan in Saudi Arabia. For some time now, Erdogan has been talking up rapprochement with the Gulf and Egypt. Saudi Arabia is next. However, according to AFP, a Turkish official said no formal announcements are expected and the trip will be closed to the press. Lucian, this is a worthwhile beginning with Saudi Arabia. Communication and civility are better than contention, but trust remains very far away.
What is the motivation? So, we had the Khashoggi murder, and there was a serious diplomatic crisis between Saudi Arabia and that was 4 years ago. Is the motivation here, is it mostly economic or is it political? I mean, is it just sort of the sands of time moving? Turkey's economy has been battered by inflation, 60%. Is there a reason? Is that what's driving Erdogan's visit, do you think?
They've had sort of the financial, the economic is a big deal, and Erdogan's in trouble at home. The economy's, he's got some weird economic ideas, especially when it comes to inflation. Inflation is close to 60% in Turkey. He got a commitment of $10 billion investment vehicle, an investment fund from the UAE, and also they did a 4.9 billion currency swap with UAE in January, which helped stabilize the lira. But on top of that, Turkey's been on a strange trip over the last decade in terms of its foreign policy in the region. It's very provocative, very contrarian, and at almost every step of the way put it at loggerheads on opposite sides with Gulf monarchies. Qatar aside, because Turkey, came to Qatar's aid during the spat, the dispute with Saudi Arabia. But there, again, on the other side was Saudi. So I think they're trying to, and it hasn't gained them anything. They really just alienated people. And now, the economic situation combined with sort of being in political no man's land and sort of it hasn't worked. So I think they're just trying to rebuild relationships with key countries in the region. Egypt's a little frosty, but I think that's working on that. Saudi Arabia will be frosty, but Saudi Arabia is trying to de-escalate across the board. So they'll be, they haven't even made an official announcement, I think, of the visit, but they'll welcome him and he'll have meetings, and they'll good things will be said, and it's a start. But yeah, Erdogan is definitely at a disadvantage here in terms of leverage.
It's interesting too, the sort of war in Ukraine and how the ripples from that have affected and sort of vibrated all across the world. Turkey gets much of its gas from Russia. So just the disruption to the energy market alone has caused a shift in priorities for almost every country in the world, including Saudi Arabia. And so it's sort of interesting. Richard, a mutual friend of ours, I won't name him here, but he always says you can tell how good the relations are between Saudi Arabia and any other country when you see who receives the visiting leader at the airport when they arrive. That will be an interesting thing to see. I don't know if it's actually already happened, but if it's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman going out to the airport, receiving you, you're in good standing. And if it's not him, you may not be. That will be one thing to look for from this meeting. Also, really fascinating point about the Arab coverage of this visit, that there is basically none in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Very telling as well, and very interesting.
I think the Saudis will come through with the niceties, and I wouldn't be surprised if MBS or even King Salman is there, because this is a head of state, and this is a head of state of a very large, important country in the region. Mm-hmm. But again, the Saudis are always conscious of the niceties. What commitments they make, I think, will be limited. I really think this is a makeup visit, and hello, and sorry about it's an opportunity to start over. Hopefully, I don't expect anything big to come out. I'd be surprised if there are big investments, announced. But even as I said, just simply getting the unofficial boycott removed would be a boon to the Turkish economy.
It's like we were talking about last week. There are no alliances. There are just the alignment of interests and whether they align or not. And just like friends over time that have had a falling out, there's a reason for them to be friends again. You start to bury the hatchet a little bit. The Khashoggi thing was 4 years ago. So, enough other stuff has happened since then. And it's time that these two economic powerhouses start to work together again. I mean, obviously Turkey's in NATO, so there's that. Very interesting going on here.
Definitely.